live from the District of Columbia. You are listening to the Black Fundraisers Podcast, a weekly podcast that celebrates, inspires, and equips Black fundraisers to excel and positively impact Black communities. With your host, Croom.
Good day, good people. My name is Croom, and I'm your host of the 100 Black Fundraisers Strat Talks, your weekly podcast that celebrates, inspires, and equips Black fundraisers to positively impact Black communities. If it's your first time with us, I'm delighted that you're here and encourage you to come back. If you're back again, thanks for rocking out with me one more again, and be sure to come back. I appreciate all the love and support and couldn't do this without you. I gotta tell you, this morning started out as an ordinary and chill Saturday for me. I thought I'd start the day taking care of some chores, folding and hanging clothes around the house, just taking care of a few tasks that had gotten away from me in the course of the week. And I sat down and decided to tune into the Oprah and Meghan Markle interview as I folded some clothes. This seemed like a relatively low-risk proposition because, like many of you listening, I'd seen the outtakes and snippets of the interview this week, so I knew what the discussion was about, but I was curious to watch the full interview nonetheless. As I watched Meghan describe her experiences and how horribly she'd been treated within the royal family by what she refers to as the institution, I heard what Black women all over America have been sharing in their harrowing encounters with racism and white supremacy. I listened as she described how she's been suffering from pain and depression of racism in silence, and how she and Prince Harry would, as the old folks in the South say, put on airs and smile for the cameras, and she's smiling and masking the pain and private hell that she's been living in over the last few years. I listened as she described how media outlets in the United Kingdom were spinning news and assassinating her character on the regular and villainizing her. And I think what struck me particularly was when she described how she and Prince Harry were traveling and a reporter, a perfect stranger, approached her and asked her if she was okay. And how this particular reporter asking her, "Are you okay?" in that moment elicited an emotional reaction from her. She teared up and began to cry because she wasn't okay. The racism that she experienced on the daily, coupled with the isolation and depression, felt, as she described, unsurvivable. And she went on to describe how she became suicidal, how she felt like life wasn't really worth living any longer. She described how the powers that be, the institution, how when she spoke to the institution and expressed to him that she needed psychiatric care, that she wasn't well, the institution dismissed her and was really far more concerned about upholding the royal family's image than they were providing her with the critical help and support that she needed. You see, Meghan tried unsuccessfully to use the resources and the systems that were available to her, and they failed her, as they do many Black men and women and people of color across the nation. I remember thinking to myself, my goodness, how many Black men and women have tried to use the systems and resources available to them, whether it was at their jobs or whether just navigating in the broader community, only to be dismissed and left defenseless in some of their most vulnerable moments. Meghan described how the institution essentially othered her and her son Archie, and made a decision that they would strip Archie of his rightful title of prince, categorically disenfranchising him. And my heart felt as though it was breaking. As a Black woman and a mother, I felt Meghan's pain. In fact, Ijeoma Oluo, in her book, So You Want to Talk About Race, describes just what it feels like navigating life as a Black woman. She said, and I will quote her, "If I stopped to feel the pain of the racism I encountered, I would start screaming and would never, ever stop." That's what popped in my head. I know what it feels like to be treated like a second-class citizen and overlooked and feeling unprotected and left to bleed out emotionally. I know, sadly, what this feels like. And I sat through the interview, and before I had the opportunity to process my emotions around it, I scrolled my phone and learned that today actually marks the 1-year anniversary of Breonna Taylor's murder. And I was reminded of how this beautiful soul, this beautiful Black woman, was slain as she slept peacefully at home in her bed. And I instantly began to weep. And as I sat here weeping, I'm like, okay, what the hell just happened? I didn't know that looking at Breonna Taylor's photos would still break me down like this, even a year later. It was in this moment that I realized that I'm still very much grieving her life. And I chose to use the word life in this instance instead of death, intentionally acknowledging the promise her life had will go unfulfilled. And it's really very sad. I'm grieving because structural racism and the folks upholding it took Breonna Taylor away from us without any impunity. I'm grieving because in our society, on a daily, we as Black men and women, and even our children, are constantly confronted by images and messages that reinforce just how society devalues our lives, our lived experience. We're policed differently than white people, and that's facts. And the Trump insurrection is one of many glaring examples of this. Breonna Taylor is dead, and her killers are free and able to continue their lives and be present with their family and continue working in the very community where she died. It hurts. I gotta tell you, I'm tired. And the pain and sorrow that I'm experiencing, that many men and women across our nation are experiencing, it feels like a ginormous Herculean load, and it really feels unbearable. But in the words of Nipsey Hussle, the marathon continues, and I'm committed to using my voice, my platform, my profession, and my resources to fight for just and the equitable distribution of resources in communities of color. That's why this podcast is so important to me, because as Black fundraisers, we're working to come up with solutions to societal issues. And while we can't fix racism, because it's so deeply ingrained in America's fabric and culture, we will continue to speak out and resist and put pressure on the powers that be to change racist system and structures nonetheless. So today I'm holding space for Meghan and I'm celebrating the life of Breonna Taylor. I think it's important that we do that for one another, that we hold space and stand in the gap for one another. And I would encourage you listening, call the Black women in your circle and check on them, not just today, but as often as you think about it, because from day to day, no, we're not okay. And beneath that strong exterior is stoicism built up from years and years of long suffering and pain. And in no way do I wish to leave out my brothers. Let's make sure that we're calling and checking on our brothers too and holding space for them as well as they navigate. We are all in this together. So while I'm feeling a little pensive today, I'm going to push through and commemorate Breonna's life, and I encourage you to do the same. Whether you light a candle today, whether you play your favorite music, dance in the mirror. I might do a little bit of that myself. Breonna liked to dance and was a big fan of Queen Bee like I am. In fact, I'm sitting here, I feel a formation in my spirit. So I might play a little Beyonce today. But I just encourage you, be kind to yourself. Whatever you do, nourish yourself, eat a good meal. Just take care of yourself because nobody's going to do it for you. And in this moment, I'm reminded of my favorite Scarface song. It was actually Scarface and Pac, the song Smile. And if you know the song, you remember how it started out with Pac saying, it's going to be some stuff that you don't see that's going to make it hard to smile in the future. But through whatever you see, through all the rain and the pain, you got to keep your sense of humor. You got to be able to smile through all the BS. Remember that. I just want to leave you with that. And I encourage you to tune in this week to the Black Fundraisers podcast. I'm hitting you with 3 times the heat this week with 3 episodes dropping. Thanks for tuning in, taking a moment out of your day to hang out with me. As I always say, you could be anywhere in these internet streets, so I appreciate the love and your listening. And until next time, have a good week. Stay down, stay tuned, and keep your head up.
Thanks for listening to the Black Fundraisers Podcast. Like what you're hearing? Subscribe to the Black Fundraisers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and leave a 5-star review. Connect with Kia on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter to stay connected.
Hello, thanks so much for stopping by. I am Kia Croom, and I'm a fundraising professional and DEI champion. I am in pursuit of racial justice for people of color and communities of color. I'd love to explore ways we can work together to change the world.